For more than 2 decades, Noel Cintron was the man behind the wheel for Donald Trump, driving him through real estate deals, TV appearances, and even trips to the White House. He had an insider's view of power, chauffeuring Trump, his family, and close associates, all while keeping a low profile. Now, at 66, the man who witnessed it all is finally breaking his silence. But Noel Cintron didn't seek the spotlight through interviews or memoirs. Instead, his story came out quietly through a lawsuit filed against the Trump Organization. This wasn't just a fight over money, it was about betrayal. The lawsuit claimed that Cintron worked thousands of hours of unpaid overtime and was stuck with a questionable health insurance deal in exchange for only a small raise. This wasn't a typical labor dispute. It felt like a deeply personal injustice. Importantly, Cintron didn't sue Donald Trump personally, but went after the Trump Organization itself. But before we continue, we'd love for you to hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying this video. If you just did, we truly appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the main content. His attorneys accused the company of callousness and greed, focusing the case on the business's practices. What started as a former driver's quiet stand suddenly became a major legal challenge against a billion-dollar empire. According to the lawsuit, Cintron claimed he was owed about 3,300 hours of unpaid overtime over the past 6 years, the maximum period allowed under New York law for such claims. To put that in perspective, 3,300 hours of unpaid work adds up to a significant amount of money. Cintron's legal team estimated the unpaid overtime alone to be worth over $178,000, based on a rate of $54 per hour. When penalties, interest, and attorney fees were included, the total damages sought approached $350,000. The complaint described Cintron's demanding schedule, stating he was expected to be on duty every day by 7 a.m. and wouldn't finish until Mr. Trump, his family, or associates no longer needed him. He reportedly worked 50 to 55 hours a week regularly, yet was paid a fixed salary that, according to the lawsuit, didn't fairly compensate him for overtime as required by federal and state labor laws. The lawsuit used strong language to criticize the Trump Organization's behavior, calling it an utterly callous display of unwarranted privilege and entitlement, lacking even a basic sense of responsibility or decency. This wording was meant to highlight the unfairness of a billionaire allegedly exploiting a loyal, long-term employee. In response, the Trump Organization quickly denied all allegations. A spokesperson stated that Cintron was always paid generously and in full compliance with the law, and expressed confidence that they would be fully vindicated in court once the facts came out. With both sides firmly opposing each other, the lawsuit set the stage for a contentious legal battle. Central to the dispute was how Cintron's role was classified and whether he was entitled to overtime pay. Although he regularly put in 50 to 55 hours a week, Noel Cintron was paid a fixed salary. This arrangement conflicted with the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, and New York labor law, NYLL, which require that non-exempt employees receive overtime pay for any hours worked beyond 40 per week. The core of the dispute hinged on whether Cintron was properly classified as exempt, not entitled to overtime, or non-exempt, eligible for overtime pay. If Cintron was indeed a non-exempt employee, paying him a fixed salary without extra compensation for overtime would violate labor laws. The Trump Organization's claim that he was paid generously and in accordance with the law suggested they believed he was either correctly classified as exempt or that his salary arrangement legally covered all his hours, including overtime. But before the legal arguments and courtroom battles, there was a long history of loyalty. To grasp the significance of Cintron's claims, it's important to understand the life he led within Trump's world. Who was this man behind the wheel for so many years? And what did his day-to-day look like amid the shadows of wealth and power? Noel Cintron's relationship with Donald Trump wasn't a brief stint. It spanned 25 years, making him more than just an employee. He was a constant presence, quietly observing the inner workings of one of America's most influential and powerful families. Beyond driving Trump himself, he also chauffeured family members and business associates, becoming a key part of the Trump organization's daily operations. While his main role was as a driver, his responsibilities evolved over time. When Donald Trump became the Republican presidential nominee and then the President of the United States, the Secret Service naturally took over his transportation. Despite this change, Cintron remained employed by the Trump Organization, transitioning into a security role. This shift underscored his deep integration and ongoing loyalty within Trump's circle. His job as a personal driver was demanding. He was expected to be on duty by 7 a.m. and often worked late into the evening, depending on the unpredictable schedules of the Trump family and their business affairs. His work weeks routinely extended well beyond the standard 40 hours, forming the basis of his overtime claims. Being on call at Trump's whim meant that his personal time was often sacrificed to meet his employer's high demands. Serving as a longtime personal driver also gave Cintron a unique, intimate vantage point. He witnessed countless conversations, moods, and daily routines, observing the life of his employer from a perspective few others had. While his lawsuit focused on labor disputes, the sheer amount of time spent close to Donald Trump suggests Cintron saw much more behind the scenes. This unique position provided insight into the daily life of a billionaire and future president, a mix of the ordinary and the extraordinary, all witnessed from the front seat. Donald J. Trump was far more than a businessman turned president. He was a lightning rod for controversy, surrounded by headlines, investigations, and whispered secrets behind every closed limo door. From campaign rallies to court battles, from Twitter outbursts to media briefings, scandals seemed to follow him relentlessly. It began with his 2015 announcement to run for president, marked by inflammatory statements about immigrants and minorities. He promised a complete ban on Muslim immigration and infamously mocked a disabled journalist during a live event. Then came the release of the Access Hollywood tape, where he was caught boasting about inappropriate behavior toward women. Despite what many thought would be a career-ending scandal, Trump weathered the storm, even as multiple women accused him of misconduct. Throughout it all, Noel Cintron remained close, literally at the wheel, observing and listening. As the 2016 election unfolded, controversies multiplied. Russian election interference whispers, hacked emails, and public pleas for Russia to find certain emails. The Mueller investigation loomed, intensifying national tension. When Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, who was leading the Russia probe, questions of obstruction of justice erupted. And after the violent white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Trump's comment that there were very fine people on both sides sparked widespread backlash. Through every twist and turn, Noel Cintron stayed on the job, witnessing history unfold from behind the wheel. By that point, the scandals surrounding Trump were impossible to ignore. Michael Cohen, Trump's personal attorney, had admitted under oath that Trump orchestrated hush money payments to silence adult film actress Stormy Daniels and former Playboy model Karen McDougal, moves federal investigators said likely violated campaign finance laws. Meanwhile, Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign chairman, was convicted of financial crimes. Amid all this turmoil, another crisis gripped the nation: the family separation policy at the southern border, where thousands of children were torn from their parents and held in detention centers, images that haunted the country's conscience. Noel Cintron witnessed a president who had grown larger than the office itself, louder than the Constitution, and more divisive than anything America had ever seen. Perhaps it was the burden of so many years, the lack of recognition, the withheld overtime pay, and the mounting controversies that finally compelled him to speak out. Cintron's decision to file a lawsuit after decades of service suggested a slow erosion of trust rather than a sudden breaking point. His attorney explained that Cintron wasn't initially unhappy with his job, but gradually realized he was entitled to overtime pay he never received. His lawyer also noted that Cintron had been hesitant to raise concerns earlier out of fear of losing his job. It was, as they said, the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, a slow buildup of frustrations. Years without meaningful raises and a contentious health insurance trade-off contributed to a growing sense of being undervalued and exploited, ultimately pushing him to take legal action. Although Cintron's many years with Trump gave him an unusual insider's perspective on the man's life and business, his lawsuit remained narrowly focused on his own wages and working conditions. It wasn't a broad exposé or a tell-all memoir. It was simply a fight over the money he believed he was owed. This focus may have been a strategic legal choice to keep the case straightforward, or a sign that his motivation was strictly financial rather than about revealing larger misconduct. To fully understand Cintron's claims, it's important to look closely at his compensation and the conditions attached to it. According to the lawsuit, Cintron's salary barely changed over many years despite his demanding role. Around 2003, his salary was approximately $62,700 annually, rising modestly to $68,000 by 2006. The next raise, to $75,000 in 2010, became the centerpiece of dispute. Cintron's complaint pointed out that despite years of dedicated service, he hadn't received a meaningful raise for over a decade. The 2010 raise was not just a simple pay increase, it came with a major caveat. Cintron was allegedly told he had to give up his health insurance benefits from the Trump Organization in exchange for the raise. His legal team argued that this trade-off actually saved the company a substantial amount of money, around $17,800 annually in health insurance premiums. When compared to the $7,000 raise, it became clear the organization was saving more than twice what it was paying him extra. Cintron's lawyers claimed this meant the raise wasn't truly a raise at all, as losing such an important benefit, combined with the company's savings, left Cintron worse off financially. Beyond salary and health insurance, the lawsuit included other allegations of financial wrongdoing. Cintron sought damages for the Trump Organization's failure to provide proper annual wage notices and accurate pay stubs as required by law. He also claimed he was owed compensation for lost vacation and sick days, plus unreimbursed work-related expenses. These additional allegations added depth to the claims of wage theft and neglect of employee rights. The health insurance trade-off, in particular, appeared to be an illusion of a raise, a move that actually benefited the employer financially. The $7,000 salary increase in 2010, offset by nearly $18,000 in annual health insurance savings, resulted in a net financial gain for the Trump Organization. This situation highlighted the cumulative feeling of being undervalued. Cintron's lawsuit wasn't just about unpaid overtime, it reflected years of growing frustration and neglect. According to Noel Cintron's attorney, Larry Hutcher, Cintron didn't have major complaints during his time working for Donald Trump. However, over time, he realized he was owed overtime pay that had never been paid. Hutcher shared that Cintron had asked Trump for raises multiple times, but aside from 2 occasions, those requests were always denied. "You were always asking for raises, and it was never granted," Hutcher recalled. He also explained that Cintron stayed on the job not because he was satisfied, but simply because he needed the paycheck. In the lawsuit, Hutcher didn't hold back in describing Trump's behavior as an utterly callous display of unwarranted privilege and entitlement, noting that Trump showed no sense of noblesse oblige, in other words, a lack of fairness or respect toward those who served him. Hutcher further emphasized that Cintron was expected to be ready to work at a moment's notice. Even the downtime between trips wasn't truly his own time because he had to remain on call. And if Cintron ever wanted a day off, he had to personally ask Trump for permission. The absence of meaningful raises over many years, combined with the disputed health insurance trade-off, fostered a growing feeling that his loyalty and long service were not properly recognized. While the overtime claim formed the legal basis of the lawsuit, the broader issue was a long-standing sense of financial neglect. This case highlights how seemingly small financial decisions, like cutting benefits or withholding raises, can accumulate over time and erode employee trust, eventually leading to major disputes like lawsuits. Looking beyond Cintron's case, this situation fits within a larger pattern of how Trump has managed labor and legal conflicts. Noel Cintron's lawsuit didn't come out of nowhere. It came against a backdrop of Donald Trump and his businesses having a well-documented history of legal battles related to business practices, contracts, and labor issues. This pattern suggests that aggressive cost-cutting and frequent litigation might be a consistent part of Trump's business strategy. A recurring theme involves accusations of unpaid or underpaid workers and contractors. Numerous reports detail allegations against Trump and his companies for stiffing contractors, suppliers, and individual workers, ranging from dishwashers and glass companies to plumbers, painters, waiters, and bartenders. For example, a USA Today investigation uncovered over 60 lawsuits accusing Trump of failing to pay bills on time. This behavior was so common it reportedly earned the nickname the Trump discount, where Trump would negotiate prices but then pay only about 75% of what was agreed upon. If true, this reflects a calculated approach to maximize profits by minimizing payments, even if it led to prolonged legal fights. In addition to contractors, there have been specific accusations of wage and hour violations directly affecting employees. Donald Trump has been cited for multiple violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act, including shortchanging workers on overtime and minimum wage, paralleling the issues raised by Cintron. Controversy also surrounded Trump's use of undocumented immigrant workers, notably Polish laborers, during the demolition of the Bonwit Teller building to build Trump Tower. These workers were reportedly paid as little as $4 to $5 an hour for 12-hour shifts, often late on payments and without proper tax documentation. They worked in unsafe conditions, exposed to asbestos without protective gear. The legal battle over this exploitation lasted nearly 2 decades before finally being resolved. Trump-associated properties have also faced multiple bankruptcies, including Trump Taj Mahal, Trump Plaza, and Trump Marina. In these cases, unpaid contractors often ended up at the back of the repayment line, frequently receiving only a fraction of what they were owed. This pattern of corporate bankruptcy further illustrates a strategy that allegedly minimized financial obligations to workers and service providers. Broader financial controversies have also followed Trump's business career, such as allegations of inflating his net worth and property valuations to secure loans and insurance, resulting in significant legal battles and penalties. For instance, valuations of rent-stabilized units at Trump Park Avenue were reportedly much higher in official statements than in internal documents, and properties like Niketown were allegedly misrepresented in value. While these issues don't directly concern employee wages, they contribute to an overall picture of aggressive business tactics and frequent legal challenges. Throughout these disputes, the Trump Organization has consistently denied wrongdoing and maintained that its operations comply with the law. Numerous lawsuits filed against Donald Trump and his companies, especially those involving unpaid wages and unpaid contractors, reveal that these cases aren't isolated incidents. Instead, they point to a consistent pattern where legal battles and aggressive cost-cutting are woven into the business's operating style. Eddie Diaz, a former personal driver who spoke to Newsweek, recalled that Trump insisted on being driven in American-made cars. Though they often shared meals while on duty, Trump, despite his billionaire status, only occasionally paid for their food. One of the most revealing parts of Noel Cintron's lawsuit was that the raise he received in 2010 came at a steep price. He had to give up his health insurance. According to Cintron's legal team, this wasn't just a simple exchange. It was a strategic financial move that benefited the Trump Organization far more than it did Cintron. Altogether, the Trump discount, the costly raise, and the unpaid overtime highlight a company culture focused on extracting more while giving less. When employees or contractors push back, the response isn't to settle quietly. It's to engage in fierce legal battles, often behind closed doors. This long history also exposes a stark contrast between Donald Trump's public persona and how his businesses have been run. While Trump often presented himself as a champion of working men and women during his political career, the numerous labor disputes and claims of unpaid wages paint a very different picture. Noel Cintron's lawsuit began as a public case filed in court, bringing allegations of unpaid overtime and the controversial health insurance arrangement into the media spotlight, sparking public interest and debate. But the Trump Organization quickly denied the claims and took legal steps to move the dispute from public court to private arbitration. Their argument was based on an agreement Cintron signed, which required any disputes to be settled through arbitration rather than in court. Shortly after filing the lawsuit, Cintron's case was voluntarily withdrawn from federal court and shifted to private arbitration. While common, this move significantly reduces transparency and public accountability. Unlike court cases, arbitration hearings and their outcomes are typically confidential. This means details of the evidence, arguments, and final resolutions in Cintron's case have not been made public. Employers often prefer arbitration because it shields them from intense public scrutiny and potential reputational damage. Decisions made in arbitration are usually binding and difficult to appeal, effectively ending the dispute quickly and privately. Arbitration also tends to be faster and less expensive than drawn-out court battles. However, arbitration rulings do not set legal precedents, meaning even if an employee wins, the outcome doesn't help others in future cases. The secrecy surrounding Cintron's case left many questions unanswered, particularly regarding its broader implications for labor rights and corporate responsibility. The Trump Organization's use of arbitration clauses exemplifies a common corporate tactic to manage legal risk and protect their reputation by diverting disputes from public courts to private forums. Though Cintron initially broke his silence through a public lawsuit, the shift to arbitration reinstated a form of silence on the case's outcome. With the details locked behind closed doors, the public was left to speculate. Opinions clashed, and questions lingered. Many viewed the swift move from court to arbitration as a deliberate effort to avoid transparency. Investigations revealed that employees within Trump's businesses often face arbitration clauses that are less voluntary and less consensual, limiting their ability to bring disputes into the public eye. CBS News reported that Trump Organization staff members are required to sign arbitration and gag agreements, forfeiting their right to sue publicly in order to keep their jobs. Critics argue this practice hides potential abuses. Many sympathized with Cintron, who claimed to have worked 50 to 55 hours per week without overtime pay, and only received a raise in 2010 after giving up his health insurance. Observers noted this portrayed a longtime employee finally standing up for what he believed he was owed. While Cintron's case may not have directly impacted Donald Trump, it added fuel to mounting scrutiny. As concerns over worker treatment gained attention, larger legal storms followed, including a major civil fraud case in New York that resulted in hefty penalties. In a significant legal setback, a New York judge ordered Trump and his companies to pay $355 million in penalties for inflating his net worth to mislead banks and insurers. The ruling came amid Trump's 2024 presidential campaign and ongoing criminal cases. Trump denied any wrongdoing, calling the case election interference, while New York Attorney General Letitia James hailed the decision as a win for justice and accountability. The judge also barred Trump from serving as an officer in any New York corporation or obtaining loans from state-registered banks for 3 years, criticizing his courtroom conduct and describing the fraud as shocking to the conscience. Trump's sons, Eric and Donald Jr., faced penalties as well, though they claimed limited involvement. Before the trial even began, the judge had already ruled that Trump committed fraud and ordered some of his companies dissolved. After the ruling, Trump Jr. accused political bias of influencing the case more than the facts, and Trump's attorney warned of broader consequences for businesses if the judgment stood. Meanwhile, Noel Cintron's story adds another dimension. Though the details of his case's resolution remain private, his struggle highlights the challenges workers face balancing loyalty and fairness. As Trump confronts increasing legal troubles, stories like Cintron's remind us of the often unheard voices affected by power behind the scenes. After dedicating 25 years of service without being heard, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.